Reading poetry is awesome.
Writing poetry is awesomer. Stick around to find out more about how to read poetry
And how to take your poetry writing from meh to magnificent. David Dabadine's poetry sings of Caribbean history, especially the history of his homeland, Guyana. Dabadine was born in Guyana in 1956, but when he was a teenager, he migrated to England to be with his dad. He was leaving behind a country that seemed increasingly prejudiced against Indo-Guyanese people and thought that England would be better. No. In fact, what Dabadine found was another kind of prejudice against immigrants and people of color.
soon. I go turn lawyer or doctor. But just now, passage money run out, so I take little work. I is a deputy sanitary inspector. Big office boy. Tie round me neck.
That's an excerpt from Dabadine's famous poem, Coolie Son, The Toilet Attendant Writes Home. From the title, the narrator is writing home to people living in the kind of poverty he left behind. But even though he never mentions it in this letter, you can tell what kind of big work he has. Most of the poem is focused on his fake happiness and dreams of success. The truth is, the narrator lives a life of servitude in the freezing cold, while trying to make life in England sound amazing. He asks about folks back home in Guyana, but only about parts of their lives that are bad or broken, like mosquitoes, poverty, hunger, sickness, and death. David Dabadine has written novels and a non-fiction as well, but it's his poetry that launched his writing career. Ever hear the expression poetry in motion? When something is very graceful and powerful, we say it's like poetry in motion, because we think of poetry as the graceful and powerful use of words. Poetic language is one of the characteristics of most poetry. But what is poetic language? One kind of poetic language is the use of imagery. Poetry takes images from the world around us and distills those images to their essential qualities. For example, poets love to use lions to symbolize strength, aggression, and royalty. He's the king of the beasts, isn't he? In poetry, the lion is a common metaphor or simile. What are metaphors and similes again? Metaphors and similes are literary devices. There are loads of literary devices, but these are two of the most common. Poets love to use comparisons. The kind of comparison that uses as or like is a simile. You could say someone is as dumb as a rock. Don't say that. It's cruel. But if you did say it, it would be a simile. So is pretty as a rose. Feel free to say that. Poets sometimes compare two things without saying as or like. In a poem, a person could just be a rose. The poet doesn't mean the person has grown leaves and petals and little thorns sticking out of their sides. They mean that the person has the qualities of a rose: beauty, sweet smell, or delicateness, even prickliness. Why though? Why? Simile and metaphor aren't just things the poet puts in to make the reader work harder to understand a poem. In fact, it's just the opposite. By using these images, the poet can show a complex idea in a few words. Remember, if there's as or like, it's a simile. No as or like, and it's a metaphor. And now, back to our regular programming. Poetic language means choosing the right word. Sometimes you need bike, and sometimes you need bicycle. The sound of the word the number of syllables in it, where its stresses are. These are all things to consider in choosing the right word. Bike is short and hard, one stressed syllable. Bicycle is longer and softer, with one stressed and two unstressed syllables. Though they mean the same thing, the words sound very different. And the rhymes? I can't even. Icicle, tricycle, gazicycle? Sometimes poetic language may even mean choosing the right language. David Dabadine decided that his first collection of poems, Slave Song, would be in Guyanese Creole, not Standard English, because he felt there wasn't enough Creole poetry in the world. It is pretty sweet to talk about the history of slavery in Guyana in the language of Guyana's black people, not the colonial language spoken by the whites who enslaved them. The language the poet chooses reflects something about the narrator's place in the world.
Jasmati live in broke down hut big like batter shoebox. Beat clothes, weed yard, chop wood, feed fowl. To hustle save she one slow penny. Because one dirty make damn cross the kanji.
By using Creole in Coolie Mother, Dabadine gives the reader a sense of empathy. We literally speak her language, and we understand what Jasmati is going through. She works her fingers to the bone. That's exaggeration or hyperbole, by the way, another kind of literary imagery. She does all that to make the cheddar her son needs to live a life completely different from hers. It's a lot of money. It might take a while. The one slow penny, but Jasmati is determined, and she knows she'll do it. Why? Because little by little, dirt can make a dam across the Kanji River. The poet could have said all of it in standard English, but would it have had the same effect? Fred de Guer chooses to use standard English in his poem Mama Dot's Treatise. Even in the title, the narrator's choice of the word treatise gives you the impression that this isn't just English, it's educated English, because a treatise is a formal expert analysis. But then there's also the name of the poem's narrator, Mama Dot. Not exactly a name for a university professor, right? So that choice to juxtapose the homey Mama Dot with the sophisticated word treatise jars you a little bit. As it should, because the poem is a lament about how mosquitoes terrorize us from birth to death, taking a mundane thing like bugs and making a really profound philosophical argument about the futility of human life. Look at how de Guer chooses short lines with long vowel sounds, as if the words themselves are mosquitoes buzzing around, droning in our ears.
Oh, to stop them milking us, till we are bait for worms. Worms that don't know which way to turn and will inherit the earth.
De Guer's doing something else too. Alliteration. That's when you use the same letter sound over and over at the start of words. He repeats the sound wa over and over in these lines. Wa, why? Oh, makes a droning noise just like a mosquito's buzz. Sometimes a poet makes new words or combines words in unexpected ways. In David Dabadine's Coolie Son, the narrator talks about the snow and them thing in England and says ice apple plenty on the tree. What's an ice apple? Don't bother to Google it. It's a word that combines two ideas. The temperate apple hanging from a tree and the word icicle, which also hangs from a tree. Cool, right? No pun intended. Poetic language is richer than normal speech. In your own poetry, try to find the right word. By using metaphor, simile, alliteration, hyperbole, and other devices, your poetry can pack in the punches with every line. If you've written poetry before, take one of your old poems and see if you can make its imagery stronger. Or write a new poem of no less than 8 lines using at least 3 different kinds of poetic devices. Try it!